Marella is once again back in her element, and to my delight, all the new through-hole fittings are working perfectly. I turn my attention to the mast, where the old halyard sheaves get replaced with new, composite ones, and then I find out what several decades of aluminium on stainless galvanic corrosion looks like when I disassemble the old deck organizers. Now, with only a month to go until we leave for our summer cruise, I need to hurry up to finish the electric head installation and get Marella ready to sail. My name is Andy, and this is the story of one small ship. Well, it's been a week of rain, and more rain. And now that the weather has let up, I've come down here to sort out the deck organizers. And I had some trouble with these. I ordered spin lock organizers, and 2 of them arrived, and they were some sort of goldish brown color. And I was waiting for the 3rd one, and when it arrived, it was black, because it turns out that spin lock have recently changed their design, and so these only come in black now, for some reason. And I got 2 new ones which are also black, so now all of the deck organizers are black. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get those fastened down on these brackets. The holes are already drilled in this one, so I can just mount the 2 that are supposed to stack on each other, like this, onto that. And this bracket is the old one from the port side, and I need to drill out the holes in this. So I'm going to go get my drill driver, and we're going to drill some holes in this thing. I took the bracket outside and drilled out the new holes, so now we should be able to fit this organizer on here. Well, not bad. So on the starboard side, we're going to mount this 4-sheave organizer on the bottom and one for 2 sheaves on top of it, and then put nylon washers in between them to protect the aluminium from the stainless. And I realize I don't need the nylon washer on the edges here, but in order to make the height even throughout, I put washers on every bolt. And now we just have to tighten these, and then we'll take the Dremel with the cutting disc and cut the bolts off, because right now they are too long. So that should be perfect. I came down here on Friday and drilled out all of these holes and also countersunk all of them. So now all I have to do is put the deck organizer in its position and bolt it down, fill in the holes with butyl tape, and that'll be it. with all the standing and running rigging in order, I want to take Marella out for some short sea trials. But before I do that, I want to make sure the engine is running smoothly. And so with that in mind, I'm going to replace the fuel filter and oil filter and also the V-belt for the alternator, because the old one is really starting to disintegrate. Well, this is very unfortunate. It seems that the belt I ordered is too short. I can't move the alternator any closer, and the belt just won't go on. I've really just pulled and pulled on it, but it's absolutely too short. There's no way. And I looked at the numbers on the belts, and they are actually different. This has a completely different model number than the new one, even though this is the one that the instruction manual tells me that I should use. Next week, hopefully, I can get a hold on of the new belt, and I'll replace the belt and replace the coolant again, and that should be that. But before I do that, today I can at least change the oil, change the filters, and I'll be ready to go next week. Since I can't finish the work on the engine today, I'm going to turn my attention back to the electric head installation. And it's almost finished, but I still need to hook up the electrics, bolt down the new panel that's going to cover the holding tank, and also hook up the discharge hose. Panel brown to positive rinse pump. Panel yellow to discharge pump positive brown. Rinse pump blue and discharge pump black to battery negative. And panel brown to aquajet rinse pump. I picked a slightly thicker gauge wire than I probably needed, but I figure better a little bit too much than a little bit too little, because these pumps are fairly power hungry. They're not going to drain the battery that much, because they'll only be running for such short periods, so not worried about the long-term power draw, just the momentary power requirements. There, I've hooked up the electrics for the head. The connection to the main breaker is still temporary, but the rest is permanently installed now. The next step on my list is to install the discharge hose, and I'm going to put a ball valve right here. I shouldn't really need one, but it'll feel good to have the ability to close off the connection between the discharge from the head and the holding tank, just in case something happens, like if the holding tank starts to leak or something like that. With the valve here, I'll be able to close off all the major connections to and from the tank. Right. Right, so now we just need to figure out the final position of the bowl and then cut this piece of hose on the bottom here to size, and yeah, then I'll have to finally decide exactly where this shelf is going to sit and basically screw it into place permanently. And I'll need to put the lid onto the bowl to make sure that I put it in a place where I can open and close the lid completely. I've routed a length of 6mm squared wire over from the head to the electrical panel here at the chart table. And I'm not going to connect it to a switch on the electrical panel, I'm just going to connect it to this fuse box. So I put a 25 amp fuse in, and I'm just going to crimp a connector onto this wire and screw it into the terminal, and do the same thing on the other side. The main breaker is of course turned off right now, so, but to be absolutely sure I'm going to remove the fuse as well. Well, that's the electrical part of the installation done. Now I just need to hook up the discharge hose and then we can test it. But in order to hook this up, I need to figure out where the final position of the bowl is going to be. So I need to work that out first. Well, I think this is what it's going to be. It might come off as a little strange and crooked like this, but I think it's just the angle of the camera that's making it look a little bit weird. It actually looks quite nice, and when you fold the lid up, it neatly goes in between here and doesn't touch any of the parts of the bulkhead or the shelf. So I think this is pretty much the only way that it's possible to mount this if I want the sink permanently mounted like this, which I do. So yeah, I'm just going to drill a few holes here and mount it permanently, and then we can test the whole setup. Excited today because the electric head project is almost done. But I'm also disappointed because yesterday I had to go and pick up my spray hood, which has not been serviced. Apparently all the guys at the canvas shop all caught COVID-19 a few weeks ago, and even though they are feeling better now and have all recovered, thankfully, they won't have time to service the spray hood this season. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to hand it in this autumn, and we'll have to live with it the way it is over the summer. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I would rather have had a freshly serviced spray hood on the boat this season. The main issue is that the UV light from the sun is breaking down the threads, so it has to be re-sewn. But the canvas itself is really in good shape, and I hope it'll last for a few more years. It's a one-off, so it's not a standard ballad spray hood, and that means that it's also more expensive to make a new one. Plus it's made to integrate with the cockpit tent, and that makes it even more expensive, so the longer I can make it last, the better. But now that the head has been hooked up and the electrics and plumbing are all working and everything's been bolted down, I want to get the freshwater system working again, and for that I need to install the new faucets. Sadly, they're not the same make. I couldn't find two of the same brand that had a long one and a short one on offer. But I think these are going to do absolutely wonderfully. Now, keeping in mind that this countertop is going to get replaced eventually, so I'm not too worried about where I drill holes and stuff in this. I'm going to replace that with probably Formica or Corian next year. I'm planning a major remodeling of the galley. I'm also going to replace the old icebox and build a proper fridge. So there are some things here that are going to change, so I'm not too worried about exactly where I put the faucet right now. The sink is going to get replaced with a bigger one as well. This old faucet here, which we used to use for the freshwater, is actually going to get repurposed and used for seawater, so this will actually come in handy now. But yeah, I'm going to start just removing the sink and removing the old faucet, and we'll figure out exactly where to put everything. It's going to have to come back because, accounting for the bigger sink, we're going to put this faucet in the center and then have the seawater over here. I mean, I'm a lefty, so for me that makes perfect sense, but if you're right-handed, I guess you'd be annoyed if it was over there, but that's for a future owner of this boat to worry about. There's this rubber gasket and this stainless something that goes underneath there. This threaded rod with a nut on it to hold those in place underneath. There. I assume that is how this will get fastened down. Yes, indeed. And just by hand tighten that for now, and worry about tightening it down properly later, but for now that looks pretty good. To connect this to the freshwater system, got this little hose barb connector which goes on here, but of course in order to make that perfectly watertight with the pressure and everything, I'm going to use some Loctite 577 on the threads. Now we can just stick the hose on the hose barb and tighten this. There. Now we just need to do the exact same thing in the head area. Alright. Now all I need to do to hook this up is to create a little T-junction in the water hose, and that should distribute the water evenly to both faucets in the galley and here in the head, using the pump and expansion tank that are already mounted since previously. There is a hole here already in the cabin sole that was used for the old manual head to get water in, but I'm going to reuse that now for this hose for the freshwater. And then I will change this up once we install hot water, because I will run PEX tubes back here instead, so the water is not going to be routed the way that it is right now anyways. Here's where the water comes over from the pump over to the galley, and so I should be able to just cut this down the middle and hook this T-connector up, and we should be able to tap the water from there over to the head faucet as well. Well, there we go. Well, that's it. So with that, I'm ready to pressurize the freshwater, and I'm sure there are going to be leaks in a few places, so I'll probably have to go around and tighten some of these hose clamps and look over all of the connections. But I'll go and fill some water in the tank and we'll see what happens. Well, I've finally got running freshwater aboard the boat again. I feel really good about that. I spent some time running about here just searching for leaks, and I tightened down some hose clamps and a couple of nuts. I've still got a little tiny drip behind the expansion tank that I'll have to get to tomorrow. For now, I just turn the pressure off and I'll empty the tank before I go home. So having mounted the new faucet and connected the running water again, that means that the new head is basically done. We have a head unit that works. We've got a control panel that we can use to flush. The electrics are hooked up, the plumbing is hooked up. The new faucet works beautifully. All that really remains now is to work on the cosmetics of this area, and I'm going to do that while I work on other projects too, because in 3 weeks we are leaving and I need to make sure that Marella is ready to sail, that everything is where it needs to be, and that the rigging is in order, that the engine is in order, and that the boat is basically ready to live in for a few weeks.
The days pass quickly, and before I know it, it's time to cast off. For 3 weeks, we'll cruise up the coast, meet up with friends and family, and stay in some of our favorite spots. Let's go! Summing up, this year's projects are, for the most part, a success. The electric head adds a bit of noise, so we try not to use it at night. It's an inconvenience to be sure, but the easier operation and the new sink and faucet more than make up for it. Water consumption is way up with the new faucets and a proper sink in the head area. Not to mention the kids are growing up very fast. Eventually I'm gonna have to figure out a way to carry more water. I managed to find the time to sort 1 or 2 things out during the cruise, like mounting a ladder on the swim platform and having a go at fixing the rooftop solar panel, unsuccessfully. That'll have to be a priority next year. As usual, it's over way too soon, and while we prepare for next season, from all of us aboard Marella, thank you for watching, for your comments and likes, and for your encouragement. We 100% plan to continue. If you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to press subscribe and hit the notification bell to follow us on our journey. And check out the links below to follow us on social media. We'll see you again in Season 3 of One Small Ship, and thank you so much for watching. Fair winds.